As I was growing up, our family of origin, used to go on vacation for 2 weeks during the summertime. My father was in the Air Force, so he called it leave, but it was our vacation when we went on leave. And over the years, that vacation was very similar from one year to the next. We would take off from Maryland and head into the Midwest to see my mother's side of the family, living in central Illinois. And then after a few days visiting there, we would drive down through St. Louis into the Ozarks to visit my dad's side of the family in and around Springfield, Missouri. And then we would do the 2-day drive home through Tennessee and Virginia, where the big thrill was an overnight stay at the Holiday Inn with air conditioning and an outdoor pool. And yes, I'm old. Repeat as necessary from one year to the next. Every now and then we would take a side trip or two, a little variation to provide, a little something new to the circuit, if you will. We might go to the State Fair in Illinois. Or we would go down to Branson, that small little town near Springfield. Or to the Lake of the Ozarks, where I learned that I was never going to be the fisherman my dad hoped I would be. One of those side trips one year was to visit a place called Cherokee Village in northern Arkansas, where there was a restored Cherokee reservation that we were able to tour. And at the end of the tour, as I remember, we were all handed a little ribbon, a blue ribbon, almost like we had won a prize for completing the tour. And the ribbon said on it, "Before you judge a man, walk a mile in his moccasins." This was many years ago, mind you. For some reason, that blue ribbon survived my childhood and wound up in a storage bin marked Rick's Stuff, that I was highly encouraged by my mother to take with me when I moved out of the old homestead. I think I may still have it, actually. So maybe it was that blue ribbon or the nostalgia of that trip, but somehow that saying has always stuck with me and remained important in my life. Before we judge someone, walk a mile in his or her moccasins. Walk a mile in the shoes of the one who stands in front of your child's classroom, day in and day out, and does his or her level best to teach them about the world. What's it like to go home after a long day like that? Walk a mile in the shoes of your doctor who seems distracted more and more during your visits and in such a hurry, but whose waiting room is always full of people who are ill. Walk a mile in the shoes of that person who's ringing the bell by the Salvation Army kettle. What's it feel like to get up and go to work for them? Walk a mile in the shoes of your cranky neighbor who hasn't been the same since he lost his wife 2 years ago now. How's it feel for him to wake up in the morning? Walk a mile in the shoes of those parents of the kids on the other team. You know, the ones who are so mean and nasty. Walk a mile in the shoes of the referee of the game. If you're really feeling strong, take a moment to imagine how all those people perceive you. How do you come across to others? There's a challenge. And if you're feeling really, really strong, walk a mile in the shoes of the woman who waits on you at the MVA. What's it like for her to get up in the morning and go to work? Walk a mile in someone's shoes, someone's moccasins. How much different would our world be if we all took this simple advice, if we took a moment to activate our imaginations and look at life really from someone else's perspective? My blue ribbon from Cherokee Village said that this phrase originated with the the Cherokee people, and maybe it did, or maybe some version of it had been around before. But today at the beginning of Advent, the first Sunday of Advent, I'd like to propose that this phrase is a great way to think of Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus is God's effort to walk in our shoes. And the essence of his life and his ministry was to walk in other people's shoes while he was with us. In the shoes or the sandals of those especially whom the world had forgotten. And this ministry of Jesus was all set up before he came with a prophecy. The prophecy that told of the coming of one who would serve and save his people. His people, Jesus' people, the Hebrew people were longing, were aching before Jesus came for God to send the Messiah who would be willing to walk in their shoes and know a little bit about what their life was like. They wanted a Messiah who would understand what it was like to be them. Around the time Isaiah wrote the words that Virgil just read for us, Jesus' people were refugees, not unlike the caravan we've been hearing so much about these days. Living on the margins, on foot, not much of a home. They had no majesty. They weren't much to look at. Little twigs, Isaiah says. They were despised. They'd been rejected. They'd suffered mightily. They were acquainted with infirmity. They were all of those things, which is why someone like that, who was like them, needed to be the one to come and save them. And the prophets envisioned such a man actually bringing to pass the realm of God, saving the world, which, judging from the way things look around here in December of 2018, hasn't quite been pulled off yet. Jesus wasn't able to do that, but Jesus did fit the prophet's description. The story tells us he was born in David's city. The Gospels tell us that he found followers among people who were not much of anything, fishermen and tax collectors, but who didn't count for much else. We hear stories about Jesus palling around with less than respectable people that others had decided it was okay to despise. The blind, they must have done something to deserve that. The possessed, the ones who had been filled with evil spirits, the prostitutes. These were the people in Jesus' wheelhouse. He was rejected during his hour of trial. He died the death of a common criminal. Jesus walked in the moccasins of the ones he came to save. And even though he hasn't quite gotten the job done, that job, of saving the world, or maybe because it hasn't been done yet, Jesus asks us, his Advent followers, to do that in his place. This Advent, Jesus asks us to walk in someone else's shoes and to discover in doing that life can really be transformed. We can be changed when we really see life from another person's perspective. Maybe this kind of thing has happened to you, an aha moment. Maybe when you finally get why someone is the way they are. Oh, I see now. Or maybe you felt transformed yourself when someone finally comes into your life and gets you. Walking a mile in someone else's moccasins. It takes some work and some time, but it can make such a difference. You all may have heard on the news recently that James Fields is on trial this week. Fields is the man who drove his car into the crowd of counter-protesters last year, 2 summers ago in Charlottesville, during the Unite the Right demonstration there, killing one Heather Heyer. I believe I've heard that his attorneys are seeking to prove that his act was in self-defense and that he feared for his life. There's another development in this story, though, this Charlottesville story that has happened over the course of the same time, received a little less publicity. Over the past year, a man by the name of Christian Picciolini who used to call himself a neo-Nazi, but has renounced all of that and has now made it his life's mission to do what he calls break hate by speaking to people all around the country. About a year and a half ago, Picciolini got a call from a mom after one of his speeches who was worried about her son, Gabe, and about how Gabe had become involved with a white supremacy group. She was worried, she was afraid. So Gabe and Christian, they sat down together for a few sessions. They were beginning to make some progress, but then when the word began to spread around the country, and it was around the country, about the Charlottesville March 2 summers ago, Gabe just couldn't resist the temptation to go back with his old friends and participate. So he went. And he found himself on the front lines of the protest, screaming at someone. But when he came back home, he looked up Picciolini again, and they began to meet again. Gabe had found the Charlottesville experience troubling this time. So the two of them, they met over the course of the year. And then when Picciolini suggested to Gabe that the two of them go to Charlottesville on the anniversary of the rally, Gabe agreed. They drove there together from out in the Midwest somewhere, and once they got there, Picciolini went ahead and asked Susan Bro, who was Heather Heyer's mother, if she would meet with Gabe. Somewhat reluctantly, she agreed. And so the two of them sat down in a church sanctuary not too far from Susan's mobile home outside Charlottesville, and they talked about how Heather had faced some of the same issues that Gabe had faced. They were both kind of lonely kids. They had trouble fitting in. They both needed a place where they could find their identity. Heather found it in one kind of activism, Gabe in another, more hateful kind. Turns out at the end of the day, Gabe's hateful beliefs, though, were a lot less about ideology and a lot more about finding a place where he was accepted. When their conversation ended, they stood up and Susan asked if she could give Gabe a hug. And so Gabe and Heather Heyer's mom embraced, proving once again that it's really hard to hate someone close up, and that it can be really profound to walk in someone else's shoes. I know how busy we're all going to be this month, but maybe there might be just a little time, a little Advent kind of time, to imagine, to prepare for the coming of Jesus by walking in someone's moccasins.
Savior's You